During the Vietnam War, Agent Orange was sprayed extensively by the U.S. military across forested areas of the country. Now, today, the Vietnamese Red Cross estimates exposure to the herbicide has negatively impacted the health of more than 3 million Vietnamese, among them an estimated 150,000 children. Filmmaker Courtney Marsh is all too familiar with these stats. She originally traveled to Vietnam to chronicle the lives of street children, but soon discovered a story that would drastically change and potentially save lives. In her latest film, Chao, Beyond the Lines, we meet a teenager named Chao, a Vietnamese boy, living in a care center for children who are disabled by Agent Orange. Now, despite his physical limitations and being ostracized by society, Chao is determined to realize his dream of becoming a professional artist and clothing designer.
Thì đó mà em đi hội chợ cái mà tôi uống nước cho xong á cái bị ở bên em bị tật á, còn về hai anh với em với em gái của em là bình thường. Em sẽ ước mơ em sẽ trở thành một nhà thiết kế thời trang.
During the film's 8-year endeavor, Marsh also met and sought the help of Charles Bailey, a lead advisor in the cleanup effort surrounding Agent Orange in Vietnam. Joining us here in the studio is Courtney Marsh. Courtney, welcome to Full Frame.
Thank you so much for having me.
The documentary is fantastic.
Thank you.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it just tells such a personal story about this boy named Chao. Tell me first how you met him.
Well, when I first came upon the Peace Village for the kids disabled by the chemical, I basically didn't want to bring in any cameras because I felt that would be quite intrusive. Right. So my classmate and I decided to put the cameras away, and I said, well, let's volunteer here for at least 2 weeks. Like, really, let's come to understand the subjects of who we are interested in speaking to. So basically it started by me being a volunteer there.
And did you know anything about Agent Orange and the effects that it had on the Vietnamese?
Actually, when I was introduced to the Peace Village, I literally had to Google what Agent Orange was. And, you know, when I had read that the U.S. military was involved with it, that was very striking for me as an American. So, no, I had really no idea what it was. But what I loved so much as I was volunteering in the camp was that these children, these kids, kind of saw themselves as kids, not victims. And I thought that that was something really amazing, because when you do research, when you research Agent Orange, these kids would come up on the image search and they'd look like victims. So it was just this very different perspective I was given, because we would see a lot of people coming into the Peace Village, taking photos of the kids for different reasons. And I was like, well, I'd love to see who those kids are, the kids behind these photos. And that's what led me to meet Chao. He was one of the older kids there at the time. I think he was about 15, and I had just turned 21, so there was also kind of less of an age gap between he and I versus the other kids. He knew exactly what he wanted at a very young age, and it seemed, even to me at the time, a very, very hard goal, because I was even trying to be an artist. You know, this was my first film. So I think there was a bit of relatability, but also he kind of had the odds against him, but he wouldn't let anybody get into his head too much to tell him no. And, you know, also that he wanted to, you know, draw and really use colors, and with his physical impediment,
it just really had an incredible drive.
Yeah, I was just drawn right to him. And that's how it kind of got started.
And I'm going to correct myself. I thought it was Chao. It's Cho, his name.
Yeah, Chao is kind of how we say, with the American accent. So,
all right. So we saw in that clip, you know, what he's suffering from with his disabilities, and yet he has this dream of wanting to be an artist. And so you show how he's struggling with trying to paint and draw, and then he finally realizes, maybe I can do it with my mouth. right, instead of my hands. When you saw that moment, was that a pivotal moment for him?
Well, it was definitely a pivotal moment for him because I think it's kind of that thing, whatever you resist will persist, and he was always trying to draw with his hands, and because of his lack of muscles in his like forearms and upper arms, it was just too hard for him to color and different things like that. And it's funny because I think what really got him to open up his mind and be like, hey, why don't I use my mouth instead of, because he saw another girl using her feet. And he was like, I grew up with people all the time around me using their feet to write and they can do beautiful calligraphy. What if I just try something else? And when he did, I think because of the movement and the control he had, if you watch him in the film, you can really see the way he uses his teeth to shift the brush. He just has so much more, like, motor skill there. And it's so funny because, and it's all in his neck, which is like full. So he just really, it's almost like a hand, and I think
you see him blossom as an artist because of that, right?
Absolutely. I think he realized when he started painting it, kind of this freedom he had that he had never been able to have with his hands. So it was just like a really phenomenal moment for him, and it took him a minute to really, much longer obviously than we show in the film, but it took him a minute to kind of hone in on that skill. But even from when we finished the film till now, it's unbelievable how far he's come. So it's
because his work in the film, once he starts using his mouth, is pretty incredible. I was like, whoa, look at that painting. It's amazing. Well, let's bring Dr. Charles Bailey in. Charles, you're joining us from Seattle, and let me ask you, first of all, in layman's terms, what exactly is Agent Orange, and why is it still around decades after it was used during the war?
Well, May, thank you for this. First of all, I'd like to say that Courtney and her producer, Jerry Frank, are terrific, and this is an outstanding film. It's the best film ever made on this subject, and I know because I've seen them all. I've been working on this subject for many years. The Agent Orange is really a code name the U.S. military used for herbicides, and it was decided back in 1960 that it would be a useful new military technique to use herbicides to massively kill off the forest to reveal the enemy troops. So they set about spraying these herbicides over increasing areas, and the spraying went on for 9 years. At the end, nobody realized that it had been contaminated with dioxin, one of the most poisonous substances we know of. So while the Agent Orange went away, the dioxin persists. Most Americans know about Agent Orange and associate it with Vietnam, but very few Americans understand that it's still a problem today in Vietnam.
And still a very serious problem, obviously. Dr. Bailey, how did you get involved then with this documentary and Courtney?
Well, Courtney, I've been working on this subject for a number of years, and Courtney contacted me about a year ago for some help with fact-checking as she was putting the finishing touches on her film. And we began to work together, and I joined her in screenings in Los Angeles and New York. And I introduced her to the American ambassador in Vietnam and the Vietnamese ambassador to the UN. And this led to a screening of her film by the American ambassador personally at 2 screening centers in Vietnam in April. And the Vietnamese mission to the UN, together with the U.S. mission, jointly screened this film in New York at the UN. These were very... this is a sea change brought about by her film. It's a real breakthrough.
That's incredible. That's the kind of awareness that you want to raise with a documentary like this. So, Courtney, working with Charles Bailey, who is an expert on this subject, must have been great for you in terms of making this film even better and also then raising the awareness about what's going on.
Absolutely, because when I was making the film, because I'm making it from Chao's point of view, so so strictly, Chao doesn't care too much about Agent Orange. It's not in the forefront of his mind because Chao's very much looks at what he can achieve, like what he can, looks at what he has, not what he doesn't have. He doesn't dwell on his past. He looks at his future. So because of that, I had adopted a very kind of limited knowledge of Agent Orange. And so when I met Dr. Bailey, it really expanded so much and really became, really for me, just such took on such another level of what this film was and what it meant to me.
Dr. Bailey, let me come back to you. What is the situation now in Vietnam with Agent Orange and the cleanup efforts?
Well, we've come a long way from when I first started working on this about 18 years ago. The two governments have slowly come closer into an alignment. And I'm happy to say we now know that the dioxin that remains in the environment, in the soil, is entirely confined to 3 former U.S. military bases. So in terms of the cleanup, the first one was completed with United Nations UNDP help in 2013. The second one will be finished next year, and the third, by far the largest, will probably take until 2022, 25. And these are ways of bringing the two governments together around a subject that originally was so sensitive that neither one of them could talk to each other. When I first went to Hanoi as the Ford Foundation representative in 1997, U.S. diplomats were forbidden by the State Department to use the phrase Agent Orange.
Oh, really?
And so
wow.
This just shows you how far it's come. President Obama was in Hanoi on May 23rd and made a speech, and I'll quote what he said. Even as we continue to assist Vietnamese with disabilities, including children, we are also continuing to help remove Agent Orange dioxin. This is a real breakthrough from not ever using the term to actually putting the cleanup and the impact on children and young adults in the same sentence. So this shows how far we've come. There's still a long way to go, May.
Yeah.
There's still hundreds of thousands of kids like Chao that need help. Over the last 7 years, I've raised about $30 million. The U.S. Congress has put up a similar amount, but there's still a long way to go to help these people become like Chao, lead their lives.
Right,
Put aside any victimhood, live lives of comfort and dignity and accomplishment, and they can.
And have a chance to pursue their dreams like he has. So,
exactly.
Yeah. And thanks to you and the work that you have done, obviously these changes are taking place. So that's pretty phenomenal that we went from not wanting to mention the name Agent Orange to now President Obama actually declaring it as an issue that needs to be dealt with. That's pretty incredible. I had no idea. Since you've gotten all this recognition, including an Academy Award nomination and other awards, many other awards you've won for this film, what kind of feedback and what kind of response have you gotten in terms of this subject and raising that awareness?
Well, I think that Dr. Bailey said it best in that we screened at the American centers in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh as well. And then also we were in New York at the UN, and Chao was actually flown to the U.S. He was the first person disabled by Agent Orange to speak at the UN. It was unbelievable,
oh my gosh,
an unbelievable experience. Probably the best experience we've had with the film. And we got to take him around New York. And the thing is with Chao, there's so many things I couldn't put in the film because the way he speaks is so inspiring and honest that it would almost seem like scripted.
Yeah.
So to hear him there speaking, and because the UN provided real-time translation so everyone can hear what Chao is saying as he's reacting, was just probably the best experience because it gives hope for the future and that he can speak more and more and evoke more change because he's really at the heart of the change, I think.
Yeah. What a great ambassador, right?
Yes.
He's such a great example of living through this, but also really getting through the struggle and coming out on top.
Absolutely.
Really.
And achieving independent living.
Exactly.
And not looking at himself as a victim. And
we should mention that because at the end of the documentary, he does begin living on his own, gets his own place, and becomes an artist who actually is taking care of himself, is able to.
Yes.
It's an incredible ending, but my curiosity now is, what's his life now like? I mean, I hope he's continuing his art.
Oh, absolutely. So when we were in New York, we went to the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. We also went to the Met. He'd never seen like an original Picasso, which was very emotional for him. And,
oh my gosh.
a Jackson Pollock painting, and just it was amazing. It was really, truly wonderful. He is currently switching apartments right now. He has I'd have to confirm the actual number with my producer, Jerry, but he has probably about 50 paintings on back hold for commission.
What?
Yeah, no, he's doing really good. He works, he's employed by what he loves to do. He doesn't have a second job. And I think that that's really the main goal.
Yeah.
He's doing wonderfully, and
Gosh,
he seems happy. Just to see him in person recently, really happy, very mature, just a really fantastic kid.
Dr. Bailey, for you, because you've been doing this work for so long, and you talked about the 3 different sites that are, you know, the last remaining sites to be cleaned up. So, I mean, you're hopeful. You must be hopeful this is finally going to be brought to an end and a positive conclusion, at least in terms of getting rid of the dioxins in Vietnam, and then therefore allowing these people to actually, you know, live healthy lives, healthier lives at least.
Yeah, that's certainly something to be celebrated, but in a way it distracts from the real heart of the matter, which is the children and young adults who are living with disabilities throughout Vietnam, but particularly with more the severe kinds of disability, and in the more heavily sprayed areas, the areas in the 1960s where Agent Orange was sprayed from planes. So we really need to keep the attention on this. The public health threat is nearly over, but the legacy of the original exposure is still there, and we've got to deal with it as Americans and as Vietnamese working together. And so there's more to be done. But I think hope is the right phrase. We learned early on that to say, Agent Orange, this is a humanitarian issue we can do something about. And everyone in both countries can respond to that.
Right, right. Well, it seems that as if at least the U.S. and Vietnam are responding in a much better way, in a much more enlightened way. But boy, you know, what a great success for you as a filmmaker to be able to create something that really is inciting change for the better and getting the word out about something that a lot of folks might not know about otherwise, right?
Yeah, and it's just wonderful that we've had the response from people like Dr. Bailey and, you know, the mission. I mean, it's just been a really an unbelievable experience, more than I could have ever hoped for. And yeah, it just feels fantastic to be a part of something.
Well,
like
congratulations
this.
to you.
Thank you very much.
And to Chao and to everyone involved and your also your partner. And Dr. Charles Bailey, thank you so much for your time from Seattle. Really appreciate it. And really congratulations on all the work that you've done for this cause. It's pretty incredible. So thank you so much. All right. Well, coming up next, how an American filmmaker set out to save unwanted children in Ethiopia. We'll be right back.